Now is it on?
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Is that too loud? It's okay, great. My name is Macon Lovelace, and I'm happy to be the chair of the Public Policy Committee for the Columbia Chamber and hosting another great forum this month. So we appreciate Mr. Gadsden, Mr. Stirling joining us. Mr. Stirling will be joining us here in about 10-15 minutes. We thought we'd go ahead and get started with Mr. Gadsden. Before we get started, I always want to thank the library for being a great place to host these events, as well as our other sponsors that are all listed up here on our board behind us. So the purpose of this meeting this month is to focus on workforce reentry and what these two gentlemen are doing to help make that a thriving program within our state. And obviously, we all know about the challenges you read about in the paper regarding lack of employment, lack of laborers, people needing that in the state to continue to grow our economy. So this would be great to have all of this covered today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mr. Gadsden. Mr. Jake Gadsden is the Corrections Deputy Director, South Carolina Department of Corrections Deputy Director of Programs, Reentry, and Rehabilitative Services. So thank you so much for being here, Mr. Gadsden. And if you could take a little time to introduce yourself, your background. I've already asked him about 50 questions, so I know a lot of this, but he and I have a great trick question for the director when he gets here. So we'll clue y'all in. There's 800 cows at the Broad River Road facility. So we're going to ask Brian when he arrives. We're going to see how close he is to that guess. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, good morning. First, I want to thank the Chamber for having me here today. It's truly a privilege to be here. I hate this part of introducing myself. Seems like you're talking too much about yourself. It's just a sort of uncomfortable thing to do. But I'm from Charleston, South Carolina, despite the fact that people say I have an accent like I'm from the North. I'm actually from Charleston. I went to the University of South Carolina. I majored in criminal justice and psychology. I started in corrections, including juvenile corrections in 1982, working for the Department of Juvenile Justice here in Columbia. In 1984, I moved to New England, which is probably why I have this accent. I started working for the Massachusetts Department of Corrections. While working for the Mass Department of Corrections, I worked in a myriad of positions. I started in what people traditionally call the Program or Classification Division, but then I switched over to what's called the Operations or the Security side of the house. I became a warden right around the age of 31. In 1997, the state of Rhode Island recruited me away from Massachusetts. I went to Rhode Island to become their first African-American warden. In fact, I was still the only one until last year when they finally hired someone else. And in 2001, I became the Deputy Director of Operations for the state of Rhode Island. And I was the only African-American that's done that, and I still am. Finally retired from state service, went to work in the county system in Massachusetts for a number of years. I had a friend who was a sheriff. He was running for re-election. And the North is a very heavily unionized part of the state, and he needed some allies because things can really get interesting in those times. Left the county system, went for a very brief cup of coffee and worked for Virginia Department of Corrections. Thought I was going to retire. Found out retirement is boring. I do not like court TV. I had enough of all of it. I had no one to play golf with. My game went from bad to worse because I was by myself. And so I applied for the South Carolina Department of Corrections, and thankfully I got the chance to come back. One last piece before I stop. One of the biggest thrills about being back in corrections is when I started many years ago, we were sort of making up as we went along about how we felt we thought was the right thing to do. After all these years, they've now came up with a number of research that tells us what's the best practices to use to try to help a human being better themselves. So I came back because there's really a pretty good roadmap on how to help out. And I figured I would much rather help someone out.
Great.
So I ended up here.
Well, thank you for that background. For the members of the audience, we're going to try to make this interactive. I've got several questions I'm going to ask, and I'll take a break, come to y'all. So at any point, just wave at me, and I will try my best to solicit your questions. So first question for you, Mr. Gadsden. Based on your work, how many inmates have successfully re-entered the workforce, or on your estimate?
I'm gonna be honest, we really can't answer that question with a number, and here's why. Traditionally, corrections responsibility has stopped at the gate upon release. So our ability to follow in the community is very narrow. So what we look at traditionally at SCDC, we look at our recidivism rate. We have the lowest recidivism rate in the nation because we provide the tools needed for our offenders to be successful on the outside. It may be anecdotal, but we sort of extract from that they must find sustainable employment, or otherwise they would be returning in some way. I mean, we work hard to give our men and women the skills that they have, but those numbers at this point we don't have. But I will tell you a little bit our plans for the future. I brought with me Ms. Peggy Mervin, who's new to our executive team. Well, long before we knew this meeting was coming, we looked at one of our big weaknesses, and that was being a real presence in the community, making the ties with employers, making the ties with the community, so that we can better track our individuals after release. Because we all think it all works, but we really don't have the data yet. And that's going to be part of what she does. So I hope next time we speak, I'll have better information.
Great. Well, I guess maybe on that same line of questioning, is there a particular story that you like, that you're proud of, a particular inmate that, you know, re-entered and has been very successful, you've kept track with, that, you know, you're proud to share with us, you're willing to share with us?
Remember, I've only been in this state 2 years, 2.5 years. What do I want to do? Yeah, there's a gentleman, I can't call his name, he's up in the Greenville area. He actually served, when I first came back to South Carolina, I worked as the warden of Tiger River. And he was incarcerated at Tiger River. He actually did 35 years. In his 35 years, he took as many programs as he could. Doing all that time, he never got a disciplinary infraction. He got released. He's gotten married. He's doing some mentoring work with youth in the community. As a matter of fact, he wants to come in and try to work with the guys inside. Now, we have some rules around time limitation before you come back in, and he's right at the cusp of the 3 years. At the 3 years, I plan to bring him back in because he's been there, done that, seen it all, and I think he can help them because he's mature.
Great. That's great story. Thank you for sharing that with us. Do you work with specific companies to hire folks re-entering the workforce? Or are you trying to work with specific companies?
Yes, we work with specific companies. I have a laundry list of them. But to be honest, probably the best way to say it is we probably work with hundreds of companies, but it's in different levels of work and different levels of engagement they have. And I'll try to go through some of them. Any employers here, so there's no one size fit all. You can take what works for you. Well, one of the levels we have is some companies actually have workstations inside our facilities. They become part of our prison industries program. And we make hardwood flooring, we have electronic component factory, we have sewing shops. We even have a tire retread company that works inside our facilities. Other companies hire crews of workers who go to work in their company in the daytime, but then return to the institution at night. They take advantage of our work release program. Then there's a new set of employees that just came around, and I'm going to ask and encourage everybody to think about this. They actually come inside, specifically train our offenders to work at their companies with a promise of they'll hire them when they're released. We call most of them second chance employers, but then there's a huge group of employers I like to call the silent second chance employers. They're Fortune 500 companies, et cetera, that really don't want the publicity of who they're hiring, but they want to be good citizens and try to help. So we take employment on a number of different levels. And a lot of the work we get done, getting our offenders ready, is done by the Department of Employment and Workforce Development. They train our offenders on how to interview, they train them on the softer skills, and they help them with developing resumes. To the point, they actually started doing virtual interviews for our offenders before they're released. So some company now are interviewing before they're released, and then hiring upon release. So we run the gamut on types of companies we deal with.
Great. Welcome, Director Stirling. I want to see you. Thank you for being here this morning.
Not cooperating.
That's okay. Thanks for being here. Continuing on with you, Mr. Gadsden, what other agencies do you work with to develop the programs and then measure reentry and success? So outside of your the Department of Corrections, which other state agencies are you working with?
Okay, this is my chance to be a politician. I've learned this through the years that whenever I try this, I'm gonna forget somebody and get in trouble. So what I'll say is I have a list in my pocket. We deal with virtually every state agency there is in the Department of Corrections. In the state of South Carolina. So we have a number of partners that are really involved in what we do. We have one particular partner that we're partnering with that actually wrote into their budget to create a database so that we can better track our offenders when they're released, so that we can do better reentry services. Now, I'll mention them because they're putting up money to be part of this. And that's the Commissioner on Minority Affairs. But everybody's involved with us. Couldn't answer any more than what we have in South Carolina. The support's overwhelming.
Great.
We partner with CAOs, we partner with DO, we partner with HHS, the entire cabinet, not Henry Pastor's cabinet, we have the other folks out there too.
Great.
Matt.
I'm gonna see if there's any questions from the, okay, yes, sir.
So you talk about the services kind of end as they exit the door of the facility. My question, and I work at a homeless center, so you can see where I'm coming from. How do you, where will they live the first night that they're out on the street? They get released from jail. I mean, you're not going to get a paycheck from any job for 2 to 3, 4 weeks. So where do they live for a week or two?
So, well, I was just gonna say, kind of how we got here. So when I first took over, I was Governor Haley's chief of staff in Byran, Stirling, by the way, and I went down to see the bus stop down at the Greyhound bus stop. I don't think everybody was familiar with the bus stop we had down there, and I was somewhat appalled with what I saw. To your point, I saw folks who had nowhere to go, had no jobs, had no future. Frankly, all they had was a prison uniform and stripe. We took the stripe off. And it was not great. So I came back and challenged my staff. I said, we can do better. How do you expect these folks to, not do better? I saw prostitutes down there. I saw drug dealers down there. So the first things I did was we paid Richland County to have an officer there, frankly, to protect our folks on release because they were being preyed on immediately upon leaving. And, someone would say, here, I'm going to give you these drugs right now. I expect you tomorrow to start slinging dope. So we ran those people off. And then we started looking for partners. So we partnered with Catholic Charities, one, for housing, because that's important. If you don't have housing, you don't have a stable place to go. You know where you're going to lay your head that night, and you know this from your work. I mean, your whole world is upside down. Shower, everything else, meal, everything. So we partnered with Catholic Charities to find housing. The other thing is we went to do and said, hey, when you start training folks inside, and that's where it started with manning reentry center. The other thing we did was we went to HHS and said, look, these folks need insurance. A lot of folks leave have mental health issues. So if you have mental health issues, your medication stops, just say 30 days after you leave, or 5 days, I'm sorry, after you leave, where are you going to find your medication? You're going to spiral in, you're going to end up in some kind of detention center, and eventually back at the Department of Corrections. So the other goal, what we're doing now in COVID for the stop of this is we've changed our classification system. So we used to overclassify. We had people who were in our maximum security units that just did not need to be a maximum security unit. They could be in a medium security and hopefully progress to a level 1 where they work. We don't have a lot of help for the state. We just don't need them. We need a transitional place for folks to go. So we're going to put our make our level 1s in half of those. They'll have jobs. We'll be able to earn a living, but they'll come back to prison at night if they're working the day shift or during the day if they're working the night shift. We already have that. We're expanding that. So they will have money savings for that first month's rent. They'll have that deposit to pay for that first month's rent. They'll be able to hopefully afford transportation and things of that nature. So that's where we're going. But Catholic Charities is a big part of what we're doing. We also have, we try to find housing for everybody. We know how important it is. Also, we have clothing closets. If y'all are looking for a project, every prison has a clothing closet. And so when you leave you should have an interview suit, and you should have clothes, that you can wear, so you're not wearing a prison uniform. Nobody should be leaving the prison uniform. And when I find out about that, I'm less than thrilled with that institution. So that's one of the goals.
Actually, I was gonna ping pong back and forth with the questions, but now that you covered that, Mr. Sherwin, can you give us an overview, relative to the annual budget, number of inmates, facilities? We've got a trick question for you as well. Let you answer that first, that the crowd knows.
So long, Mr. Chair, I have
Yeah.
to laugh.
How many cows are at your Boulder Road facility?
I have no idea.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Mr. Gadsden looked it up for me, and they're 800, so that was the trick question. Yeah, we were gonna see if you were gonna say like 750 or how much.
I would have 20, but I just drive by and I just stare at it.
Well, if you could give us an overview, just annual budget, inmates, facilities, that'd be great before we jump back into the line of questions.
So we have, and this is something I think South Carolina should be proud about, but when I took over, we had about 24,000 folks in culture. And then in 2010, we did sentencing. We frankly sending people to prison who could have better been dealt with in society, parole and probation, actually. So, on top of that, it's it's never one thing. So we had sentencing reform, we weren't sending people to low-level people to prison. We also, we're doing about finding people jobs, job training, housing, drug treatment, mental health, HHS and everything else. People aren't coming back to prison. We have the lowest recidivism rate to come back to prison for 3 years in the country. So our number is just over 15,000. Now, COVID did have something to do with that by dropping that pretty fast because the court shut down. So we were still releasing folks. But we're about 15,000, I think, 343 or something as a Mondays count. We were at 23,000, we closed 6 or 7 prisons, all level 1 prisons. And our budget is just over 500,000. We're hoping to get some more money from the General Assembly, working on a raise for our officers. I took over, they were making just over $26,000. The one come work at the Department of Corrections, $26,000 a year. So we're hoping to get another 21 million.
Great. Mr. Gadsden, going back to questions before, how do you instill behaviors in folks to keep them from being repeat offenders? What is the program or main goal?
Right. Remember I said earlier, one of the reasons I came back was about research and evidence-based practices. Well, one of the things research taught us that I didn't know early in my career is that we can't make someone change. People see the world and interpret the world based on their impressions of the trauma that they've had. So what we do first of all is we work on the way they think, on the way they interpret the actions that happen in the world. You hear people say a lot of cognitive training. Well, that's what that means. We spend a lot of time before anything else working on how they think. Because once we work on how they think, then all the consequences that become important to you and I make a whole lot more sense to them. So that's what we do first. But then we work on family reunification. We work on the soft skills they need that we don't think about, like being a team player and being able to talk out a problem instead of getting aggressive about it. So those are some of the things that we do to try to help them stay up.
Great. I'm gonna have another question from Mr. Stirling, and then I'm gonna come to the crowd. Well, actually, you look so eager, so I'll let you go. Please, yes, ma'am. Right there, right.
I want to ask you, with all of the youth crime that's taking place, and as you read in the news, you see that a lot of the young people are possibly being treated as adults. Is that posing a problem for you guys? And is that causing you to have to look at some of the things that you just talked about? Because now you're dealing with children.
We don't really deal with it. I mean, anybody under 18 doesn't come to us. That'd be a BJJ issue. But we do have one 17-year-old.
Yes.
Right, as an adult, we have to have separate agreement, certain laws and everything. We get people that are 18. We may deal with an 18-year-old a little different than we deal with a 30-year-old. The human brain is not fully developed until it's 25. So we may have some different kind of training. We've got youthful offender dorms and prisons and things of that nature. Not prisons, dorms. if they're sentenced under the youthful offender act.
So even though they're sentenced that way, they're not necessarily brought to the facility.
Well, if they're sentenced to a prison, they come to us, but that's very rare. Usually they go to DJJ, which is a separate agency in corrections.
I'm gonna call you Brian, because I know you as Brian. Brian lives down the street from me, so that's why he was laughing at me calling Mr. Stirling. So, Brian, can you talk about just gangs and contraband and what we read in the news, and are you encountering that same issue in your systems historically, 3 years or 4 years ago compared to today?
So, the gangs in our system have always been there. They're always going to be there. Contraband is something that I've invited since I got there. We're familiar with Captain Robert Johnson. He's a captain at Lee Correctional Facility, and back in the I think 2005 or 2008 or 9, I think it was, contraband captains were in charge of stopping contraband, and the gangs didn't like it, so they put a hit out on him. And they went to his house, knocked on his door, and they banged on the door. And he knew they were coming for him. He's such a hero. He and his wife, they had a code and word and everything. He was back in the back of his house, shaving, and he yelled for them to come to him so his wife could get out. And he was shot 5 or 6 times. And I don't know how many pints of blood the human body holds, but I think he was given 10 times that. It's literally a miracle. And it was such a sophisticated crime that they used the 38 because there's no shell cases for 38. There was a hit put on by the gangs of Lee. Saw an article yesterday, I don't know if Christy said that to me or if I saw it, but somebody tried to kill a correctional officer in Georgia. And they went to the wrong house and killed the wrong person. 5 days ago, some guy just answered the door and was killed. A director in Colorado was killed. Guy got out of prison in, I think, Texas, went to Colorado. There's some connection there, and he robbed a pizza delivery guy, killed him, put the pizza delivery guy's uniform on, walked up to the house and shot that director. So these cell phones are the reason that most of this has happened. Ever since there's been prisons, I mean, everybody's seen all the old prison movies. There's contraband. You can get contraband in, but the cell phones are the ones, the reason that all this can come. Now, how many people have heard that drones are delivering contraband to prisons? 2. They are 3, 4. So they are. That's the other problem. We have fences that are only so high. And I mean, they can fly right up to the window. They can open the window. They're not supposed to be able to, but they break the windows out and they will stick their hand out and get contraband. So what we're doing, and I've been working on this, the reason I told the director, Captain Johnson's story is because I told him I would work on fixing this. So we've met with the industry. I'm in charge of the national directors of corrections across the country, Contraband Cell Phone Committee. And we've met with, it's called CTIA. It's the telephone industry, basically. And they've opposed jamming, which the federal law will not allow us to jam. It will allow the federal government and the Bureau of Prisons to jam, but not state prisons, which makes absolutely no sense to me at all. Because you can't interfere with the radio signal, and that's how RF frequency is how cell phones work. However, we are going to start within the next couple of months. If you type in your phone, I think it's *#06#, you will have an IMEI number that will come up, which is International Mobile Identifier Number. That number, and when we identify it, we will be able to then add it to the stolen phone database, and that phone will be shut down within 2 to 5 days. So we will not have folks that are incarcerated. And here's just the brutal truth. The folks that you read about in the papers, the folks that are shooting people and things of that nature, who are sentenced to prison, think, okay, society's going to be safe. It's just not the case. I've got several cases in mind that I can't talk about where problems are happening behind the bars of our prisons. We had Jared Johns, he was an Army officer, veteran, and there's a sexting scheme. Are y'all familiar with the sexting scheme? Some are. And someone was texting him and said, hey, send me a naked picture. He sends a naked picture, and 5 minutes later, he gets a phone call saying, I'm Sally's dad, you just sent a naked picture to a 15-year-old. I know everything about you. They knew his rank, they knew where he was stationed, they knew commanding officer, they knew all that. We're going to call him, and you're going to get kicked out of the Army, and you're going to get charged criminally unless you send us money. He immediately shot himself and killed himself. And the way they were able to find that out was on his Apple Watch. And it was officers at Lee, and we've got an assistant at Lee that frankly doesn't work that great. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But someone called us and said, hey, the parents called and said, hey, we got word that this happened out of Lee Correction. So investigated it, and they were charged in Greenville. So hopefully it's not jamming, which will immediately shut the film off and deny the city. It does, though, allow us within 2 to 5 days, FCC's kind of going back and forth those 2 days, 5 days, to shut the phone off and add it to the stolen phone database, which was supply and demand, and all in business, you understand this, supply and demand, that phone cost is gonna go up. The phone right now, mobile phones about 2,000 to 2,500 per. So that phone will be shut off, and the cost will hopefully be so much the forbearance that they will not be able to afford new phone. Tablets. Which are recorded in their doors, in their rooms, and have their private conversations. No longer do they need to go to the wall things. But that's what we're doing. That's one way to put a big dent in what these guys are doing. We had the largest RICO case in state history. Through a prison where they kidnapped a woman, they tortured her, they waterboarded her. We had a hit put on during this thing, and someone was killed. And this was a meth ring that ran basically from New York all the way over to basically Spartan. People were dealing drugs from prison. It's crazy. It just blows my mind. And I couldn't get any traction. Senator Graham was great on it. Congressman Duncan, Wilson, and others were great on it. I couldn't get any traction. Couldn't even get a hearing in the Senate or House. It's mind-boggling. But this is where we are. And the basic reason is that a lot of these, this industry, they put a lot of money in congressional coffers, so they're not going to go against the telecommunications industry to make a lot of money. And no offense to anybody that's with.
Continuing on that question, are y'all providing the tablets, or are they allowed to purchase them?
We provide the tablets. You have to take the phone calls and things like that. We provide the tablets. One of the things that I learned when I first took over was that all phones are controlled by the gangs, and they charge a tax. To go use that wall phone, you're gonna have to pay the gangs to use it. The other thing I learned though is that some of these folks that are on the wall phones, they're telling their wife off or whatever. I don't care about this, that, and the other. And they get behind these doors, and all of a sudden, so baby, I'm so sorry I did this. And, it starts a different conversation. You can imagine being away from your family for 2 to 5 years. There's going to be issues with money. There's going to be issues with health. There's going to be issues with child rearing and things of that nature. They need to have those conversations with their family members, or a tough conversation with their son, more of a caring conversation, kind of show a softer side, probably show outside on, as we call it.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I worked previously with your predecessor on a program that I was very, very impressed with. The CIU
Yes.
has a program that is outstanding. I think it's in its 13th or 14th class. Also, there's another program that is new, that's Claflin University. Would you tell us some more about those programs and how they're growing and what you see for those type programs?
Sure. CIU, Columbia International University, right across the river from us. They came in, and we happen to know, I think Alabama is over now. They came in and copied us. So they come in and they get divinity, basically, for lack of a better word, degrees, 2 or 4 year degrees, and we have chaplains. We don't have enough, and so they're gap chaps, as we call them. They go in and they kind of fill in and can help. But they get the degree, and we hope they go out and become chaplains in the community, so they can help those. The other program, the Claflin program, is something we also have Northeast Tech, which is teaching technical, which I'm more partisan towards is the technical degrees than actually the college degrees. And Jake and I have had that conversation because I joke, and I said this during our press conference when we announced the lowest recidivism rate. But I had a plumber come to my house, and I was in private practice at the time, and my sink was stopped up. So we went out and poured something down my sink. 15 minutes, he came back and handed me a bill, and I looked at him and said, "I'm in private practice. That's more than I charge an hour." And he said, "Yes, you should get ordered too." So those programs are using grants from the federal, Pell grants from the federal government to educate folks. So we're gonna see how it goes. Education is a key to recidivism. Our average education level for folks that come to SCDC is 10th grade. So we know if they can get that GED, that high school diploma, or that technical degree or college degree, their chances of coming back to prison go way, way down at a great savings to taxpayers and a great savings to society because there won't be those future crimes. Jake, did you want to weigh in on that?
I think you did the absolutely perfect.
Thank you. A little off subject, but talking about your experiences and Jake, your background working, multiple states. How have you encountered any past offenders or people coming back being addictive and threatening you and your family, in the past, and how do you protect your employees? I guess that rolls into how do you protect your employees that are, ground level with these inmates and, have a right to protect themselves, past incarceration.
My question.
I'm gonna go with Jake first, and then Brian, if you want to jump in.
Fortunately, my entire career, I've never had that happen from an offender who's been released now. But some of those still incarcerated, that's a different story, but when they've been released, I haven't had an issue so far, so I've been lucky in that way. And it's hard to tell why they choose certain people and don't choose other people. I guess it depends on the type of character you're interacting with. So yeah, I never had that problem.
And how about your employees? How do you train them, protect them? The guys, obviously y'all are in the office, but you interact with inmates, but your prison guards that are, more day-to-day interaction. Have they had any experiences, or how do you, coach them to protect themselves?
I'm sure staff had quite a few experiences, but we train them and we have pretty strict training on conduct and interaction between offender and staff member. Everything's based on respect. Everything's based on following the rules that we put into place and not straying from those rules. And then we teach them about communication. If something's going on that you feel uncomfortable about, it's your responsibility to let us know. Then it's our responsibility to take care of you. Whether that's separating the two, sending the offender to another institution to sort of end that problem. But it's through our training that we work on their professionalism and our communications. It's pretty much how we handle it.
Brian, anything you want to add to that?
Pretty much the same. I mean, I've had interactions inside, and what I try to do, and I'll tell this quick story, is I went and we had mass with the bishop and Catholics, so we came to the prison and we had mass, and someone said, "Hey, you need to go check the dorm out." I went and checked the dorm out and walked in. Somebody said something to me from the top tier. I said, "Why don't you come down here and talk to me in person?" They came down like a barrel of bricks. And I was like, "Oh boy, it's gonna be a bad Christmas Friday." It was just me and one officer. He was huffing and puffing, and I knew that he couldn't kind of just back down. So I put my hand out and shook his hand. I said, "I'm Brian Stirling, director of the department. What's your name? Where are you from?" And I treated him like with respect. And all of a sudden, just the whole conversation changed. And I said, he said, "I have a question for you." I said, "Okay, I just want to ask you one thing." I said, "What are you doing to better yourself while you're here?" He said, "I'm trying to get in school." And so I took my pen and paper out and I wrote his name down. I said, "What do you want to do? And I'm going to make sure you do that." I said, "Now, what's your question?" And he asked me the question. I gave an honest answer. And I said, "I don't think that's going to happen." We have 85% in South Carolina for some crimes. And he wanted to know if it was going to get down to 65%, he'd be able to get out early. And I just said, the will of the legislature is just not there. And this is before the crime spike. But I'll tell you, he said, "Well, can I see the law?" And I said, "I'll bring it back to you." So I went back to my office, printed it off. The next day, I went by his dorm and gave it to him. When I go in that dorm now, that guy's all over me. But when I turned around, it was me, and it was a heavily blood dorm, probably 40 blood members standing behind me. And they were all like, "Thank you very much," and very respectful. So I try to treat everybody with respect. And that's what you have to do. You just have to be aware of your surroundings. I have had an incident with my children one time, which is scary, but you just have to treat people with respect and be aware of your surroundings wherever you go. And that's just what we train our folks to do.
Great. Thank you. Any other? But yes, sir.
So, Director Stirling, Director Gadsden, thank you for your public service for 20 years. My question's on culture building. You've got 21 institutions all across this great state, thousands of employees, thousands of students. How do you build culture, and what are you trying to do to continue that culture seems really strong, so you provided the best service to the offenders as well as protecting yourself.
Real quick, and Jay can go. Thank you for your service. JW is our former chairman of our school board. First person I appointed, when I became director, I called him and said, I didn't know I had a school board. I didn't know I had appointments. So I called him, he was my first appointment, raised to the rank of chairman. So thank you very much. Culture stuff, I mean, you know, it's just tough when culture is embedded in the prison system. It's just a different, kind of a different thing. I mean, Jake's been doing it his whole life. For me, this was new, but just thanking people, walking around and thanking people, having a career path, trying to get raises for them, telling them that we're working on things and things of that nature. There's real leadership at the institution, important, whomever, and then it kind of works its way down or up, however you want to look at that. But we still have some cultural challenges. I'm not, you know, there are some places where we look and I look at, I love data. I look at each shift and the big turnover. There's a lot of people on that shift. I'll call Joel Anderson, who's my deputy over that area, and I'll say, you know, why is this shift losing people? Bring the captain or whomever in and say, turning people over left and right, what's going on in your shift. And you know, maybe they need some more training before we just fire them.
The culture is a difficult piece, but whenever you're making change, you got to sort of do some things with the culture. A couple of things you do is you try to put people with expertise in a particular area over that area, because staff accept more readily someone who they consider to be an expert in the area doing something. You know, someone who's been there, done that. The other thing is you try to standardize your operations. As long as you let everybody run their own place, it's hard to get cohesion about what you're doing. And then you just be consistent and follow through. Knowing it takes about 7 years to change a habit, so it's going to be a while.
Great. I've got one last question from my list of questions, and I'll open up 2 or 3 more questions to the audience. We'll let these gentlemen, we've got very busy schedules, get about their day. But for both of you, we'll start with Jake and then Brian get next. Y'all touched on pay raises, budget, you know, consolidation of facilities. If you had a top 2 or 3 items that you could add to improve your system and improve what you're doing and the message you're delivering to your inmates and improve their quality of life, what would you do?
The top 3 for me would be more involvement from the community, particularly employers and support type services, because we can do as good a job as we possibly can with them on the inside. The real work is on the outside. That's where they really need the help. Employers willing to hire them, willing to give them some time and opportunity to move up. Social services to help them in the beginning because they're coming out with relatively little. One of the tough things about being incarcerated is you accumulate these huge amount of fines that must be taken care of before you can do anything. And so it gets real difficult to make those things work. In my last one, I would.
Those aren't fines from prison. Those are court fines.
Right, and enough months, I'm sorry, sir. Yeah, but it's when they walk out, they have all these fines they gotta take care of. The last thing would be more technology. The world became technological. We need to be able to treat our and teach our offenders more about technology so that they're on an even footing when they're going out. But also inside, the best thing that came out of COVID, I hated virtual anything. Hated it. But now it's so natural to me. I almost prefer that more than face-to-face meetings. Because I can multitask. If I don't want to listen, I can do something else. But it's a way also.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I mean, it's a way for us to, in the realities that we have a dwindling workforce, for us to take our most talented people, particularly around programming, and project them into multiple institutions instead of one location. So those are the 3 things that for me.
Brian, same question.
I mean, I'd say cell phones. I mean, it just would make our institution safer. I would say money for staff, hiring, our vacancy rate is so high, we cannot do anything. Programs or anything, it's so needed. Mental health, anything without the staff, because we don't have the staff, we can't safely move people around, we can't safely program, and things of that nature. And the other thing I would say would be mental health on the outside before they come to us, intervention for, because there are so many people that I think could be diverted if it was out there and not end up in prison and not end up with some bad results we're seeing now in education. I wish people would stay in school, or if they don't, go get that GED or that other degree, because that is just key for them not coming. It's cause and effect. Mental health and education, cause and effect. And it's very hard to deliver mental health services in prison because of staffing, hiring. They put the prisons in rural areas. But guess who doesn't live in rural areas? There's not a lot of professionals in rural areas. They did it for jobs and things of that nature. But it's very hard to find that top psychiatrist, that top psychologist, that top doctor, and just say Greenwood or McCormick or something like that. They're in Columbia, Charleston, Green. You got prison in Evans. I mean, it's just it's far away from everything. So that's where technology is coming in.
Yes, sir, in the very rear, and then we'll go with the blue shirt next.
Sheriff Zavag, I've been on Technical College. We've been partnering with our colleagues at SCDC. Second Chance Pell goes live next year. Had Pell, been for 20+ years, no Pell, and Second Chance Pell will open up next year. We had a question about higher ed, we had a question about culture, we had a question about resources. My question is, as we gear up as a state for Second Chance Pell, and that opens up for all of the basically inmates, what resources are available, maybe, or you see available, either in corrections or from partners like the Chamber of Commerce to help facilitate? I know we would love to have the right program at institutions. I know our sister institution would as well. So we're certainly looking forward to partnering with SCDC, but you know, there's some very real cultural differences. I mean, a higher education system is wide open. We love chatting, we love technology. A prison system, obviously with cell phones, there's some very real concerns there. But if you could speak to any maybe resources that we might have to help facilitate that, and maybe what plans you might have as this takes off in the future as Peller.
Sure, and I'll be quick. Jake's area of expertise and his staff, but we've done it with CIU, we've done it with Northeast Ed. We can do it. I don't see a problem with that. We're getting more accepting of technology. We just need to make sure the right bumpers are in place for safety so they don't get out and use the technology for the wrong ways. I mean, you know, people have been using technology for good and for bad for years. I mean, think about the car. You know, they used it. It was great to get around everything, but they also used it to rob banks. So, I mean, it's no different. We have cell phones now, and they're using it for good and using it for bad. So, I think we'll be fine with the technology. The thing I would say, though, is if you're a business and, you know, I read the papers and check, I see the boards, I see what's going on, I see the companies coming in, I have conversations, I see the needs of companies, and I talk to companies and listen to them, and I'll come back and say, for example, welders. You know, Governor Haley kept on saying, we need more welders, we need more welders. Well, I mean, you know, we started welding programs. Governor Master says with the board and everything that's going on there, we need 18-wheel, we need CDV drivers because there's a big need for that. And we're seeing that with supply chain issues. So one of the things we're asking for is a CDV simulator. We already have one, we need more. So those are the type of things.
Okay, yeah, I knew you're gonna ask that technology question. There's a couple of things we're looking at. One, in fact, we got a meeting, I think, next week with Google. We're looking at a completely different LMS system that might make it easier for the colleges and the technical schools to communicate with our system so we can push it out to the offenders. We're also talking to a vendor that has a separate type of tablet, but it's nothing to do with entertainment. It's all about programming and education where we can really do live virtual classes. But they set the technology that the students can't see each other or talk to each other. They can only see the instructor, but the instructor can see everyone. So that gives us a lot of comfort around our security pieces. And it's in some kind of cloud setup, so we're not worried about needing to do a whole lot of whitelisting and all those other things. Yeah, we're thinking about it, and we're meeting with representatives from the technical colleges so that we can talk about things as a state. So, yeah, we got some things we're working on.
Y'all have time for one more question? Yes, sir.
Hi, good morning. I'm the CFO of Owen Steel. We need welders. So my question for you all is, who do we contact, who do we talk to? We're busy. We can pretty much guarantee 48 hours a week of pay, of work. Who do we talk to be able to get connected? Because my understanding is that the former offenders that we've hired have been very successful. It's worked out well for us. So and we need more skilled labor.
And here's the thing we can do is we can do a training program so we're ready. If you tell us this type of welding, this type of whatever you need, we can do that training program, have them tested, they can be ready to go, walk out the door and walk right into your facility, or actually they can start before they leave to the point about the homeless shelter and have that, have that. How much does it pay?
Oh, God. Let's see if I should know this number right. Probably $20 to $25 an hour. I
Please
would
don't
say,
tell me all.
especially for skilled. And good benefits, so.
And that's the goal, for them to have that first month's rent or more, so they can, put that deposit down for that apartment, and hopefully get a house and, live up in their.
It's very much.
Yeah, I will give you the contact. I'm gonna give you my card, but the
Okay.
person you really need to talk to is the young lady sitting in the front row. This is why we
I got
created your
cards too.
position, just in case. Yes, we have a lot of welders, male or female. We have a lot of great female welders.
Okay. Male or female.
Okay, we'll be in contact.
And the good thing is, well, I'm not sure if it's been mentioned, but you will get tax credits and job training credits
That's
also.
not bad.
So you do get that and you get a bond and everything else. So that's good also.
Before I go to Susan, as a executive member of the executive committee chamber, that line of questioning might be worth both of y'all come together. So thank you so much. That's why we bring the business community together with y'all. And that was, thank you for coming and asking that question and making the connection. Susan, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. And I want to say thank y'all too for coming and thank you everybody for the interest. It's been great to see the bob and heads and everybody moving. So what I want to do is when we send out a follow-up notice saying thank you for coming, I will provide the contact information for the programs that y'all been asking for, if that would be helpful for everybody. And then also, if y'all want to tell us, are the nonprofit agencies that you work with locally that we could work with to support your prison closet or any of the ministry work or any of the things that you're doing to help people transition back into the business world. So those are just general questions. What can we do to support y'all?
We'll take the clothes directly. We'll run through a contraband. If y'all do a clothing drive, we'll take them, interview suits, everyday clothing we need. But United Way we work with, some other.
Yeah, I'm thinking programs really close by the Columbia area. You get the Austin Road Society. We're very involved with. There's an organization called Reentry. We're extremely involved with them. There's a new program just came to Columbia called Turn 90. We're also very involved with them.
That's a great program.
Yeah.
Work great, Charles.
Yeah, so there's 3 of them I can think of off the top of my head. Let me get your information, Susan, and I'll send you
Okay,
information.
I'll follow up with you and Chrissy and everybody and just make sure that we share all this information so that we can help y'all help us and vice versa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for your leadership, your hard work and challenging employment times and challenging, just general environment, COVID and everything that's going on. Thank you for making time to come downtown and speak with the chamber and its members. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.